That's allegedly that's a replica of the one that Bob Lazar worked on, the sport model.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, designs by Perry. The E in Perry is a 3, and he's a dude on Instagram that sent me that.
Very cool.
Pretty dope, right?
Yeah.
Now, that clip I just played you is going to come into play in just a moment. You see, Luis Elizondo has finally made some comments about Bob Lazar. And if you're not familiar with who Bob Lazar is, well, he's an alleged whistleblower that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, that worked at Area 51, worked on, UFO craft, may have seen a body, actually got to work on these craft himself. All right, before we get to these clips, I think it's important that we watch one clip in particular, and that's just to give us a little backstory about Bob Lazar, who this is all about, right, this video. So I think it'll just help us better understand the other 2 clips when I show you this.
A lot has changed in the decades since Bob Lazar first told this wild story. The Pentagon recently admitted that it really has been secretly studying UFOs, and then it wanted to figure out and duplicate that technology.
George Knapp looks back at that 1989 interview that started a whole new conversation.
It's totally impossible. The propulsion system is a gravity propulsion system. The power source is an antimatter reactor. This technology does not exist at all.
The claim sounded like Hollywood sci-fi. Months later, when his identity was revealed, Bob Lazar said he worked at a secret facility near Groom Lake, where alien technology was being reverse engineered, that is, taken apart to figure out how it worked and whether the Pentagon could duplicate it. This is the simple drawing he made at the time.
Here now, I had access and was permitted to view and look at the operation of this main level with the gravity amplifiers and the level below.
The premise seems less preposterous now. In a new documentary about Lazar, he describes in detail the spacecraft he worked on 30 years ago.
So Luis Elizondo has been asked a few different times about Bob Lazar, and each time he's kind of given, the indication that he doesn't really know much about Bob Lazar's story, which I've always found to be quite perplexing, to be honest with you. How does he not know about Bob Lazar's story very much? Now, I've got a clip from a Joe Rogan podcast to help explain that, but first, I want you to hear Luis Elizondo's comments on his new interview with Chris Ramsey of Area 52, where he lets on that he actually knows more about Bob Lazar's story than he's ever let on before. Take a look.
And it's funny because I actually got to ask Bob Lazar that question. And he said, for the same reason, he said it's exactly like a magic trick. Why doesn't the government talk about Bob Lazar?
Well, probably why they don't talk about me, I can imagine. We go against the grain. I've never met Mr. Lazar, to be honest with you, and for the record. So people say, well, what do you think of Lazar? I don't. I have no way to judge. I've never met the gentleman. I think he's saying his truth, whatever that truth may be, just like I'm saying mine.
Sure.
But look, the government has spent a lot of time doing the same thing to me. When I first came out, they even denied that ATIP was real. They even denied that I was part of it, right? Like I think somebody even accused, it wasn't even at the Pentagon. I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? I mean, there's my desk. There's a safe that's got all the stuff in it. So I suspect if he's enduring the same thing, it'd be for the same reasons that they try to obfuscate. There's a saying we have. First of all, you deny everything, you admit nothing, and then you make counter accusations, right? And so there is this spectrum of efforts that happen when there's an inconvenient conversation to have in a government. The first thing they do is they deny it. And then when they can't deny it anymore, they'll start trying to take away someone's credibility.
Now, given that answer, it would seem that actually Luis Elizondo knows quite a bit about Bob Lazar's story, at least the aftermath of it, right? What has happened to him, the ridicule, the divisiveness that Bob has created in the UFO community. Love him or hate him, people stand on one side or the other, right? And the fact that Luis does know that, because again, he's always let on that he doesn't really know much about him, but clearly he knows more than he's letting on. Now, he's not revealing if he believes his story or doesn't believe his story, but in a interview he did on Joe Rogan, Luis Elizondo, he sort of explained a little bit more of why he's never looked into Bob Lazar's story. But again, Sounds like he has.
I'm sure you're aware of the Bob Lazar story.
I'm aware. I don't know Bob. I've never met him.
You never got into that?
I did not.
How could you not with your line of work?
Because, I always wanted to be insulated from prejudicing the jury. And I know it sounds kind of strange, but I didn't ever.
Makes sense.
It's kind of something I impose on myself because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions of going in. Most people kind of, I suspect, would be tempted to say, well, I'm going to learn everything I can about, UFO lore. I wanted the opposite.
You're a better man than me.
Well, all of them better.
Chasing that shit down.
I think I just wanted to be very, very careful to preserve the investigative integrity, right? And we're all humans. We're all biased. There's no way around it. We all have some degree of bias. Let's be honest and truthful here. It doesn't matter what type of bias it is. We all have some sort of bias somewhere, whether it's food or it's the people you like to date or whatever. I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. And so I always kept it very, very focused on the here and now and, what can we see today?
Right. You're aware of the story, though, right? The basic...
Tangentially, that he worked at a particular facility, and at that facility he was exposed to some sort of UAP technology.
That thing.
Right, that thing.
That thing right there, the sport model.
So I have to admit, that's an interesting answer, right? He doesn't want to go in with any preconceived notions, but anyone who's ever seen any Luis Elizondo interview, he talks so much about the past and other stories and other incidents and all kinds of things, right? Books, movies, ideas, theories, speculation, all having to do in the past. So that's an interesting answer to me. I think probably, if I'm being honest, he probably doesn't believe Bob Lazar and just doesn't want to say that, right? Just wants to keep it neutral, which as someone in his position, I can actually understand that, right? Doesn't want to cause any waves, so he just doesn't really say much about it and just kind of moves on from it. I think that's more the answer because there's no way he didn't look into Bob Lazar's story or hasn't heard of it and doesn't know some of the detail, right? Like, let's be real. If he believed Bob Lazar's story was real, he would have absolutely looked into it and found out, right? And if it was real to some extent, wouldn't he know about it and would they've studied it, right? So there's kind of some indications just by action or lack thereof that can kind of, give us an indication what's going on there. And the only reason I bring it up is just because Bob Lazar is again, he is a huge figure in the UFO community, and so is Luis Elizondo. And what Luis Elizondo thinks of Bob Lazar's story could be helpful for a lot of us, right? But I don't know. That's kind of what I read into it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is that how you're seeing it? I don't know. I'm curious. So anyway, all right, y'all. We'll see you on the next video. Remember to like and subscribe. Put out new videos every day. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.